Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of Not Your Average PK podcast. My name's Carissa, I'm your host, and I am Not Your Average PK. For those of you who are new here, PK means pastor's kid. So we talk a little bit about faith, culture, and with the whimsical twist of the perspective of a pastor's kid. So today I'm really excited to get into a hot topic. And so today we're going to be talking about trauma. And it's not what you think, because I feel like a lot of times we are talking about trauma just to unravel it. But today I want to talk about trauma from the ways that we abuse talking about trauma. I want to talk about stop identifying with your trauma. I know that's a little bit of a hot take right now because we're all just kind of discovering our trauma and seeing how to deal with it and cope with it. However, I feel like we have gotten into the rhythm, especially like my generation, Gen Z, of really not being able to separate us from what we've been through and not being able to live without talking about our trauma 24/7. And so if I've lost you so far, listen, I promise it will make sense. Just bear with me a little bit. I know this is a little bit controversial, but I do feel like it's important and will help a lot of people. Because, listen guys, hear me out. We need to stop using I am statements for the things that we are struggling with, because it leads to false identities that we are now rooting ourselves in, which are lies. We are rooting ourselves in lies when we are identifying with our trauma. When we are using I am statements, talking about things that we are struggling with that are not a part of who we are. So listen, I'm going to give you an example. We need to stop saying, I am anxious, I am depressed, like I am confused. Let's start saying instead, like, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling depressed, like I'm struggling with depression or something like that. Because I feel like it's almost become trendy to identify with the things that we're struggling with. Like, anxiety girlies, where are you at? Like, haha, yeah, I'm so depressed. Like, where are my other depressed girlies at? No, this is not okay. I feel like it's so toxic and something that we've normalized now in our culture. And I see a number of things wrong with it, and we'll get into some of those things. You are not the thing that you struggle with. You are not anxious. You are not anxiety. You are not depression. And the second that you start to believe that's who you are by using those I am statements associated with them, you give yourself over to it completely. And it's so much harder to overcome after that, because it becomes a part of you. There is power in our words and in our mindset. And I promise you, the minute you start letting the truth flow out from your mouth, you'll begin to see how much your perspective shifts after that. Because listen, guys, it is so much harder to lead from a place of hope if you're leading from a mindset that does not breed hope. Anxiety does not breed hope. Stress does not breed hope. Depression does not breed hope. Confusion does not breed hope. And so if we're using those things in our life so much to the point where we're leading from them, we will not be leading from a place of hope. We will not be leading from a place of peace, from a place of joy, of victory. We are giving ourselves over to the power of our struggles. And now they are overcoming us instead of us overcoming them. And listen, this is going to be another little controversial hot take over here. I want to talk about triggers, about the word trigger and how we use it in our society right now, because I feel like that is directly associated with trauma and our trauma in general. However, I believe that the word trigger has been manipulated so much in our culture that now it's just used as a cop-out and an avoidant. Like, oh, if I don't like what's being said right now, you're just triggering me, so I have to leave. If you disagree with me, you're triggering me, gotta go, can't be friends with you, can't have a conversation with you, can't hear anybody else's perspective because it triggers me. That's a problem. Like, you're using you being triggered as a way to avoid uncomfortable conversations and uncomfortable situations that will inevitably help us to grow mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Growth only happens from a place of uncomfortability. Growth does not happen when we're just standing still. If we're not having these uncomfortable confrontations, and if we're not allowing confrontation in our life, period, then we're not allowing growth. And I believe that a lot of us are not allowing growth in our lives because we just say that anything that has the potential to be outside of our regular views or perspectives or whatever is just triggering us. So we can't handle it right now. I can't handle you right now. Mentally, I can't do it. Which it might be true maybe for some people, but I really do think that we've overused and manipulated the word and the concept behind it. And we're using our trauma as an excuse to do that without thinking of the why behind that. Okay, not this is triggering me, I have to leave. We're just saying I have to leave, but we're not asking why is this triggering me? We're not tying it back to our trauma and then trying to grow from there. We're just halting it right there and saying, I'm not dealing with this because it's triggering me, and we have just stopped there. We've stopped the growth process from there at that point. And listen, guys, there are always going to be moments and spaces that we need to go in which we don't feel safe. Like I said before, growth happens from a place of uncomfortability. And so a lot of times, if a place is unknown, we don't feel safe in it, or maybe because of previous experiences, we don't feel safe in it, and we allow that trauma that we have to lead where we're going and what we're not going to do, instead of dealing with it and growing from there. There's going to be places that we need to be in which we don't feel safe, but if we conquer them, we will end up so much stronger on the other side. And the reality is, we can't back away from where God has called us to go either. And so sometimes those places won't feel 100% great, but we can't back out from it just because it's uncomfortable. And listen, I'm not trying to excuse the behavior of people who have hurt you or done things to you in the past, because it's very real, the trauma that you have experienced and the trauma that has been done to you without your consent. However, we've stopped the growth process right there. It's like, I went through trauma, so now this triggers me, so I'm going to go the other way, instead of I've been through trauma, this triggers me because of my trauma that I've been through, but I'm going to overcome it and continue on the race. I don't want to excuse anyone's behavior that has hurt you or that has caused you pain, because I know that pain is very real. However, I want us to try to remember that same person that hurt you was also made in the image of God. The image of God is in them the same way that the image of God is in you. And so when we start to see people as people and not just inflictors of pain, then we're able to then have that freedom of forgiveness and growth that comes from that. And listen, the reality is that we're all perpetrators in somebody's story, and we're all victims in somebody else's story. We are all going to be perpetrators and victims at some points in our life, probably already have, because we do not live in a perfect world. We live in a world where hurt is real, harm is real, bad things happen, and there's people who do bad things, right? And we're one of them. We're not perfect. And I think that we need to recognize that we have hurt people in the past the same way that people have hurt us in the past and will continue to happen in the future. That is the world that we live in right now. So I think it's important to just acknowledge that in order to help us move forward as well, because everyone has like the basic level of lowercase t trauma. Things that have hurt us, that have happened to us, that caused our brain to have a traumatic response to it. But then only some people have that larger trauma, that capital T trauma of more intense pain and affliction that has happened to them in their lives. And it may not have been your fault, obviously. However, it's still your responsibility to deal with it because it's part of your story and you need to grow from it. It's not the responsibility of the person who has inflicted pain on you to deal with your pain. It is always your responsibility, even if it wasn't your fault, it is always your responsibility to deal with and grow from your own pain and from your own trauma rather than clinging to it and making it part of who you are. Because what we don't heal then gets repeated and done to other people. So if we're always just clinging to this is who I am because this is what has happened to me, then you're just going to inflict that same this is who I am onto other people. It seeps out into different ways. What we identify with comes out of us in every single way. The way we talk to people, the way we act, the way we treat other people, the things that we believe about ourselves and about other people. Women, the things that we believe about men, the things that we believe about women, and generalize that over both genders. It's coming from a place of trauma. However, it is not their responsibility to deal with your trauma. It's your responsibility to deal with it and grow from it, not just for the sake of yourself, but for the sake of other people that you may end up inflicting the exact same hurt and pain onto. Because if I'm leading from a place of hurt, I'm going to hurt other people. If I am bleeding, I'm going to get blood on everyone around me that I'm with and that I touch. That's the reality of it. Because hurt, leading from a place of hurt, is going to just continuously perpetuate hurt. And the cycle is not going to end until we take on the responsibility ourselves to end it. And that whole thing of, you can't know me without knowing my pain and my story and my trauma, that is a lie because you existed before your trauma. You existed before that person hurt you. You existed before you were depressed. Before you started struggling with anxiety, before you got confused, you existed already. So people can still know you without knowing your trauma. And sometimes I think our trauma even becomes an addiction. It becomes an idol where we can't meet somebody new without talking about our trauma. We can't meet somebody new without talking about all the ways that people have hurt us, pained us in the past, why we can't trust people. Your trauma is an idol that you have rooted your identity in, and you will not be able to be free to be the person that God created you to be until you deal with that trauma. And I'm not saying, that it's wrong to talk about your trauma or, to obviously go to therapy to deal with it and whatever, depending on how you are dealing with it. I'm not saying it's wrong to talk about it or acknowledge it. It is there. It is real. However, how much are you clinging to your trauma and depending on it to describe who you are? How much are you depending on it to be who you are? People can know you without knowing your trauma, without knowing your story, without knowing your pain and your hurt. And I'm not saying that your anxiety doesn't matter. I'm not saying that your hurt doesn't matter. I'm not saying that your trauma doesn't matter, but that it's not the only thing that matters. You are so much bigger than what has happened to you. You are so much greater than the struggles that you deal with. You are so much more valuable than your trauma. So don't degrade yourself to be rooted in something that's beneath you. I think that sometimes we're just identifying with our pain too much. We're clinging to it so much because we're worried that if we stop grieving with it, that it will stop mattering. And that's a scary thought for a lot of us. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true. That no matter what, your story still matters. Your story is still valuable. It can be used. However, the pain in it is not what's the valuable part. It's the victory and the overcoming it. Despite the pain, despite the trauma, despite the hardships that have happened. That's the valuable part. It's crossing that bridge and giving hope and inspiring other people who have been through the same thing to do the same. That's the value in it. That's the beauty in it. It's not that your story won't matter anymore. It's that your story didn't end there. And if we allow ourselves to heal, sometimes we're worried that there's like this fear that if we're healing, that we're becoming okay with what happened to us and that we're letting other people off the hook who have hurt us if we begin that healing process of letting go. And I am here to tell you that that is not true either. And the concern of mine is that you are going to be wallowing in something that maybe somebody doesn't even know that they did to you. You are holding yourself back from growth because you are not allowing yourself to forgive that person and to forgive yourself as well. It's not like you're letting somebody off the hook if you begin to heal. It's that you are not allowing that pain that they inflicted on you to rule over your heart, your mind, and your soul anymore. But now you have the power over your trauma to overcome it. And the only way that that's possible is through forgiveness. Really. Forgiveness is a divine invitation to no longer define you by your wrong against anyone else or define me by my wrong against you. It's a divine invitation to let go, to heal, to overcome. And even if you're still holding that person accountable, that's fine. That's not holding you back from forgiveness. It's allowing what they did to rule over your life, that you're letting go of that part. It's not allowing your anger and your bitterness towards that person to rule over your life. It's okay if you still don't trust them, of course. Forgiveness is not automatically trusting somebody again. Forgiveness is not harboring that anger and that pain in your heart so much where it bleeds out all over you into your mind, body, soul, which is not even physically healthy for you, by the way. And really, when you're allowing God to bring forgiveness into your life, it's a divine healing from your trauma, from the things that have hurt you, from the people that have hurt you. And it can be scary, but I promise you, it's not saying that what happened to you doesn't matter. It's not saying that that person shouldn't be held accountable. It's just for your own. It's for your own benefit. It's for your own growth. It's so that you can become bigger than what happened to you. It's so that you can move on, can grow, can progress in your life. And so you harboring that anger and bitterness is not doing anything for the person who caused you hurt or pain. It's not holding them back in any way. It's only holding yourself back. And I think that in order to do that, our call to action is clinging to Jesus through the hurt, through the pain that is very much real, through the trauma that very much happened to us, clinging to Jesus through it all, because he is the one who heals, he is the one who saves, he is the one who redeems, he is the one who forgives us throughout everything. So rather than clinging to that pain, rather than clinging to that trauma, which is very tempting, cling to Jesus, who's the one who can free us from it. Clinging to that pain is not growing us. Clinging to that trauma is not growing us. It's clinging to Jesus, who brings us to overcome the pain and overcome the trauma and the hurt that has happened to us. And in our relationship with him, we become healed. There's always a risk in every relationship that you're in, whether it's platonic, whether it's family, whether it's a love, a romantic relationship. There's always going to be a risk of getting hurt, and then of asking for forgiveness, and then getting healed. It's always going to include, a relationship will always include those things. And it's whether or not we're ready to get past just the hurt part of the relationship and experience the healing part in the relationship. So I hope that this helped you all a little bit. I hope that you're able to get something out of this, to not cling and identify with your trauma, not just allow being triggered as a cop-out or an avoidant to deal with your trauma, but to really dive into, why does this trigger me? What happened to me that caused me to retreat, and how can I overcome it to be bigger and better than what has happened to me, to be bigger and better than my trauma, and to identify in the one who created me rather than the problems that have happened to me. And so thank you so much, guys, for watching this. I pray that you have a beautiful, blessed day in life. I am praying for every single one of you. And I hope that this blessed you or encouraged you in any way. And I'm always here if anyone has any questions or wants to talk about anything deeper or further. I'm here for you. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Have a great rest of your day.